Welcome to the Clarity Advisor Show, where you'll learn how to grow your team today. Join Ken Trupke and his guests as they discuss what works and doesn't work to grow your team in today's world. And now, your host, Ken Trupke.
Hello, and welcome to the Clarity Advisors Show. There's probably no place where it's more important to have your team working as a team than in a hospital. And if your team needs to really pull it together and function efficiently and effectively, well, then my guest today is going to have some great advice for you. Randy Crawford has run a hospital system and pulled those teams together for maximum efficiency, where literally life is on the line. Since running a hospital, he's also moved on to working on a really exciting new treatment for diabetes, which I'm sure we'll get into. So welcome to the show, Randy Crawford. Randy, how are you?
Doing well. Thank you very much for having me.
Excellent. Absolutely. So tell us a little bit. Let's just go ahead and jump into Restore. Tell us who your customers are and what you do for them.
So our customers are primary care physicians or surgeons, nurse practitioners, PAs who are looking to get a better outcome for their diabetic patients. We're able to help them lower their A1Cs, help improve eyesight, improve kidney function, decrease neuropathy 95% of the time. We're totally outcome driven, and we're available throughout the country.
Excellent. And A1C is one of the markers for diabetes, right? It's one of those numbers that when you have diabetes, you're trying to keep an eye on.
That is the gold standard for everyone, yes.
Okay. Awesome. Fantastic. So give us just a snapshot of your background. I know you've had a lot of medical experience doing different things as a practitioner, nurse practitioner, and then running the hospital into Restore now. So just give us a quick snapshot of that journey.
Sure. So in the early 2000s, I started my medical journey just trying to learn how to be a nurse. I started out as a CNA in the hospital. As I was going to school, I worked my way into becoming an LPN.
Okay.
Eventually became an RN. Went back and finished my bachelor's degree and finished my master's in 2014 as a family nurse practitioner. Worked in the cardiology space for quite some time. Enjoyed every minute of that. But as my kids grew, I needed to work a little closer to home. And so I moved back to my hometown as far as my job. I'd never left there physically, but my job was about an hour north. And so I took a job as a hospitalist there and worked for a year, eventually becoming the CEO of that hospital system. And I was with them for 2.5 years, and we found Restor Metabolix during that process.
Okay.
We were the first hospital to implement this in the United States. And it's a treatment, some just insulin and saline treatment that we give IV for diabetes, and we see tremendous results that are coming from that.
That's fantastic. So let's talk about Appling for a minute. That's the hospital system where you were the CEO. So you came in as a hospitalist, and you can tell me exactly what that position means. But from there, then you moved to CEO. So let's talk about what the hospitalist does and how you transitioned to CEO, and maybe some of the challenges then of building that team as the new leader.
Sure. So as a hospitalist, you see basically anyone that does not have a regular doctor that's not on staff with the hospital. Okay. Sometimes you even see those doctors' patients as well. We were a small hospital, so I had the opportunity to do a lot of really cool stuff in a rural setting. And so it was imperative that I brought the team that we had, which was very limited because we were such a small location, that we brought them together quickly and got everybody up to speed on what the things that I wanted to do there. Okay. So we did, and we were able to transform a team that was, they was doing okay, but we were really starting to give some really good care as I transitioned.
Okay. And what were some of the lessons, maybe even some of the mistakes that you made transforming that team and going from that position of hospitalist to CEO and having to really form that team according to your vision for success? And what were some of the things that maybe were mistakes that we could learn from?
Wow. Understanding that people don't see everything that you see.
Okay.
That was unbelievably clear early on. So I had to provide clarity for what my vision was and what the most important thing that we did was, and that was to take care of a patient. We had to make sure that everything that we did was outcome driven and absolutely 100% about what's best for that patient and how to get that done effectively and efficiently, and absolutely on a cost prohibitive basis, because there's just not the money in a small system where we were that was in some of these larger systems.
Okay. And was the team on board with those changes? Did you have anybody that maybe was a little resistant to change?
Well, there's always going to be those that are resistant. The thing that helped me the most was that the fact that I had been the hospitalist and I had been in the weeds and I had done that for numbers of years. And the time that I spent as the hospitalist, the people on the ground, the people on the bedside knew that I had the best, I was looking for the best for not only the patient, but also the employee.
Sure.
So with that knowledge, they backed me pretty strongly, and we were able to do some really cool things. For example, we were not growing at the beginning of my tenure, and so within the first 6 months, by just a few changes and just a few things in how we communicated with the employees, the doctors, the patients, and the community, we went from basically stagnant to growing at 10.5% in the first 6 months of my tenure there. So we were going really strong. And then this little thing called COVID came along, and then we all learned how to communicate effectively.
Okay. Well, I want to come back to that. First, I want to understand, especially for those of us who think of a hospital as kind of just this thing that is, it's not as a business, and yet it's definitely a business. So when you talk about growth, what does that look like for a hospital, and what are the goals around growth? Maybe just at your system, but how did your company think about growing that business, which that hospital really is?
Well, sure. Where we were located, there were 5 hospitals within 25 minutes of us. So there was really a multitude of choices that any patient could choose. Okay. And so what we wanted to do was make sure that we were the first choice. And again, communication with that patient and their family, communication with the staff and the outside agencies as far as the businesses in town and the key members of the community, to let them understand that, hey, we're here for them. We can do the things that you need, and to just turn the mindset around from, we don't want to go there because of what may or may not have happened in the past, to, hey, let's give this a try because they're definitely doing something new now.
Okay. So were you guys not at capacity when you took over, and then that growth filled the capacity?
Yeah, well, we were well on the way to capacity. We had a 101 bed nursing home. We had 5 clinics. We have all rural health clinics. We had a 30 bed hospital and a 30 bed senior care center. And so by making those changes, we got to capacity pretty quickly in the senior care center, and the Jerry Sykes Center and the nursing homes. And then in the hospital itself is where we saw the most growth, where we started to see the outpatient services coming to us once again that were just driving away. They didn't know that we had a brand new MRI machine. They didn't know that we had brand new 4D mammogram machines. They didn't know the training and all the specialties that we could offer there, because there was no communication prior to.
Okay. And just so we're clear, this was a not-for-profit hospital or a for-profit hospital?
Not-for-profit.
Not-for-profit. Okay. But that doesn't mean there's not economic realities you've got to meet.
Sure.
Okay. Sure. So talk about that a little bit. What were some of the challenges of coming in and where it was, and then where you took it?
So coming in, we were $25 million budget. And within very short order, we were moving towards, when I left, there was $30 million budget that we were growing. And again, we were in a town the size of 20,000 people. Just the outpatient services alone were growing at much more than the 10% as the overall. They were growing exponentially because, again, it was learning hey, this person works there, that the people knew in the community, the opportunity to spend that dollar in your own hometown versus someone else, and the magnitude of which it generates more dollars in that hometown is critical for, shopping local, spending local, those kinds of things, and understanding that those things were real and had to happen.
Sure. Okay. Well, you had mentioned things changed when COVID came along. I want to dive into that right after the break. We'll be right back on the Clarity Advisor Show.
Is your business where you want it to be or on track to get there? Clarity Advisors helps business leaders improve communication and get your team aligned and engaged for greater success. We specialize in helping you streamline your sales and operating systems to improve efficiency and grow your profits. Call or text Ken at 616-822-2998 to have a complimentary 12-minute call to see what some clarity could do for you.
Okay, welcome back to the Clarity Advisor Show. We're talking with Randy Crawford. And Randy, you had mentioned that things were going really well as CEO of the hospital system, and then COVID hit, and that's when you said you learned how to really communicate well. So tell us about that.
So when COVID came through, it was just devastating for everyone all throughout the country. There were massive changes that all of us had to make where, if, in my opinion, if they did not need to be on campus, that employee, we needed to find a way to make sure that they had the adequate equipment to work from home where they could be the safest and potentially, if they were sick, not infect anyone else.
Sure.
We had to be able to effectively communicate clearly something that no one, and it's clear to this day, no one still truly understood what was going on. We had we set up call systems for patients' family, because at that time there was no one coming in the hospital unless you were an employee or you were, a patient. And so we set up call systems so that we called the patient's family in the morning and in the afternoon, giving updates throughout the day to let them know that they were safe or, what their condition was. Mm-hmm. We had to do some similar things, even with staff and throughout our system, because it's not like you want to leave the hospital and walk over and go into a rural health facility to see patients in those locations. Also, those patients then stopped coming. They didn't want anybody coming into anywhere. So we had to learn telemed and how to communicate that and how to teach that within, basically 48 to 72 hours so that we can continue to take care of patients and get those patients the medications and the treatment that they needed, even if it was at home, or give them the advice, hey, you need to come to the ER or you need to do this, that, or the other.
Yep. So for your staff, first, just how big was your direct reports, your senior leadership team? And then how did you communicate with them? And what was the rhythm and the cadence of getting together, especially in those early days and weeks of the pandemic back in March of 2020?
Yeah. So early on, we had meetings every morning, and there was 10 direct, I had 10 people that directly communicated to me.
Okay.
And from that, there was a total of 450 total employees that we had to get that information out to. So it had to be very clear in the morning meeting so that it did not get miscommunicated after we all left the room, which can happen. I hear something and you hear something. It's the same words that's come out of somebody's mouth, but what it means to me and what it means to you could be totally different. And so we had to work a lot on clarity. We had to do the same things. When I say we had a morning meeting and I had 10 people that reported to me, I had the sheriff's department in with me. I had the city manager. I had the mayor. I had the county manager. I had the school superintendent. That was the morning meeting, so I could explain to everybody what was going on, and we could all speak with the same voice. So it was not just the employees of my group. This was our whole city leadership, and we had them in our boardroom every morning for multiple weeks until we got it all, straightened out and could handle things.
Yeah. Okay. And what were some of the things that worked to communicate? Especially, I just smile when I hear you talk about like the message being heard differently for people. And then when you try to cascade that down from you to 10 people and then from them to 400 some,
Yeah.
what did you learn about what works and what doesn't work when you're trying to communicate that consistent message down to every person in the organization?
Less is more. Less is more. Bullet points and less is more. The ability to take something and break it down to the simplified version and be able to communicate to that patient or that employee that will be communicating to a patient. And nowadays Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all these other things are out there. If you put a comma in the wrong place, it changes the meaning, and people can just absolutely go off on a tangent. So we tried to make sure that we had those bullet points written down, and that these were the things that we were trying to communicate every day, so that everyone stayed on pace. And it's not an infallible thing. I mean, we messed up a lot, but we had to recover and retract and do this, that, and the other, because every day, something from the government was changing. I mean, nothing stayed the same. It was all fluid, and it was just it was a crash course in how communication should be. Quite frankly, I've read that at West Point, there's a book that some of the cadets get, and it has questions like, what was King Arthur's sword's name? Excalibur is the answer. It's not, I think. It's not, well, maybe it was. No, Excalibur, period. That's the communication you have to get to, and you have to get to that level so that there's nothing else to it. This is where we're at right now. That could change in a whim. So we have to be very clear, very strategic about what we say, and sometimes you can't give out everything you know.
So less is more, I think, is a great just rule of thumb for communication, because we can't really remember more than that, and when more than a couple bullet points. And when you try to do more, people forget, and then they start selectively remembering, and it just, things get messy in a big hurry. But yet there's often a lot you need to communicate. So did you find that the rhythm of every day help, so you could do a little bit today and a little bit new tomorrow and a little bit obviously things were changing, but even just to try to just moderate and distribute the information in bite-sized chunks that people could handle? Did you kind of just distribute it in pieces like that, or how did you work it when you had too much information but you knew you couldn't give it all at once?
Right. So what we would do is we would start in the mornings, like I said, and if there was a significant update that needed to happen, we would have another call or whatever at lunchtime. And then at the end of the day, if it was necessary, we could do the same thing. That way we had planned those out. So if there was a change, I mean, we had the physical meeting that morning, but we knew that there was going to be times during the day that if something needed to also be pushed out, that we would be doing that together. And so it was very important that the county, the city, the school system, the hospital system spoke as one, so that there was not that miscommunication throughout mass, because everybody was looking for the next, the sky to fall. And we just had to temper emotions and console patients and families, because it was a hard time.
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely. That's some really good lessons. I'm really interested in how that went. And so as the pandemic kind of moved through 2020, like you said, everything was very fluid. Things started to get more of a consistent rhythm into 21. You left the hospital system sometime, midsummer, late summer of 21, right?
Right.
Okay. So by the time you left, were you still having those daily meetings, or had things changed, or were you keeping those because you found them to be so successful in terms of communication?
We scaled them down. Them down. The entire county was not involved at that time. Thankfully. And, but we did have weekly calls with the county and as needed calls with the county. And something that had really worked well before that they had set up is through the emergency medical system was when there's a hurricane coming or tornado warning or something along those lines, that we had already prepared and had systems in place, because these meetings are going to happen. You know what I'm saying? And you, as you build a company, as you build anything, these things are going to happen. Stuff is going to come up, and you need to be able to communicate that quickly to a lot of people. And you need to have those things if not fully fleshed out, at least the diagram of how it should work, so you know where to start. And we had that, thankfully, and so it was not as tough to go from 0 to 100 as it could have been, but it was still tough.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. It's nice to have the structure of the meeting rhythm, whether that's a daily or a weekly meeting, in place, so that you just have that place that everybody knows, well, that's the time to communicate this information. And
Right.
you know, as the leader, well, I'm going to have everybody in the room at this point, this day or this week. And so I can batch up some information for that. You don't have to call a special meeting. You just have it in place, and maybe you don't need it every time. And you can always cancel it if you need to, but at least it's always there, because it's just so important to keep things real time. So, well, that's fantastic. I appreciate that. Let's move up to Restor Metabolix. Talk about your current team and who you've got around you, and how you're communicating with them, and what lessons you brought maybe from Appling, and just what are you doing with this team?
So this team is quite different. We have a team that is assembled in multiple locations, meaning the home office is in Marietta. My office is in a small town, Baxley, Georgia. Our chief marketing officer lives, an hour plus away in another small town. We have another group that lives out in Texas that we communicate with often. And then we have an age difference. I think our oldest member is 75 and our youngest member is 22.
Okay.
And so when you have certain geographical differences, age differences, communication style differences, work ethic differences, it's a challenge to keep and continually motivate everyone in the same manner. Luckily, we have a system and a product that's easy for us to do with the motivation piece. We actually see patients improve. Well, I've been in the medical field for 20 plus years, and that's really not the norm. You get them over a hump and they continue to digress. Diabetes, as everyone knows, is a progressive a disease. It is not typically supposed to get better.
Right.
But what we've been able to do is see those changes. And so by the people on our team see our patients getting better, it's easy to keep everybody motivated. It's not about me. It's not about them. It's about these patients that we're seeing, that we're helping. And that may sound cliche, that may sound whatever, but that's just the truth. It's hard to turn a patient away or turn things away or off when you see so much good is happening, and you don't typically see that in anything.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that you brought up that you've got a big difference, a range in ages and geography and some of those kind of challenges. Those are themes that we talk a lot about here on the Clarity Advisors show. Tell me about how you're handling those challenges, the challenge of remote work and people in different geographies, maybe different time zones, and then also that age difference. It can be, it can just be challenging because people communicate differently regardless of age, and then you add some of the generational differences. So talk about that a little bit with the current team, and what are you finding and how are you handling it?
Wow, that is probably the most difficult thing that I do every day. Mm-hmm. One of the good fortunes I had is I met a gentleman when I was young, like 19, 18, 20, somewhere in there. His name was Joe Peachy, and we had the great fortune of getting to sit under him and his wife, and he taught me something early on, and that was the DISC program about personalities. Mm-hmm. DISC. Please look that up if you guys have an opportunity. That's by Dr. Robert Rome, and Joe Peachy is phenomenal at teaching that. And I've had 20 plus years now to kind of off and on that's my hobby. I mean, I don't play golf. I don't do a whole lot of stuff. I kind of study people and understand how to communicate with them. And so being able to understand that the 75-year-old has probably got more energy than the 22-year-old is also mind-boggling. He is incredibly motivated, and he has a work ethic that not many people can keep up with. He just grew up, and he has a total different mindset than what the generation does today, and even the generation that I grew up in. We were taught to work hard in my family. We all had jobs as soon as we could walk and talk and do whatever. And we're trying to do those things with my children, but it's not the same. The laws are different now. The things, so the kids that are coming up through, those 22-year-olds, they are put into a pretty tough situation. But I've made sure that they had the same opportunities that I had when I was that age, and I made sure that everybody in my company has the opportunity to sit under Joe Peachy and do disc training and understand communication the way I've had. And so that helps a tremendous amount, that we're all coming from the same source. And so when you have an opportunity to have communication with, the 75-year-old guy versus the 22-year-old female, it can still come from the same source, and understand that the way I need to speak to the gentleman that's 75 versus the female that's 22, they have a different personality. And my job as the leader is to learn how to communicate. It is not my job as the leader to bark off orders. My job is to teach those people what I need them to understand. And whatever I have to do to adapt to that, their learning style, the way they hear things, the tone in which I speak, the how fast I speak, that all matters depending on the conversation that I'm having with whatever group that I'm in at the time. The message doesn't change, the goal doesn't change, but how I deliver it has to change, so that, again, if I'm just throwing something out there and they're not receiving it, what's the point?
Sure. Yeah, that's good stuff. You and I are both good friends with Joe Peachy, and believe and buy into that DISC profile as a way of improving communication.
Absolutely.
And what you learn pretty quickly is that the differences between ages or geographies or backgrounds are far less important than the differences in styles and behavior styles of task orientation versus people orientation, and deliberative processing versus quick processing. And you learn pretty quickly to speak to the individual based on where they fall within that DISC profile, because it really, to be effective, has so much less to do with how old or where they're from than it does with how they're oriented. And when you can dial into how they're oriented, you can just be so much more effective as a leader. That's just gold. It is so true and so helpful. I think sometimes we get stuck on the idea of we have to talk to 20 somethings this way and 40 somethings this way. And really that's not how you can group people. You really can group people that faster pace versus the deliberative pacing and task and people. Those are ways that people are similar, not some of these other things that we think of as the ways to group people. So as a leader, in the end, you're absolutely right on. I totally agree with you that our job is to communicate the information. I like to suggest that we're giving the what's, and it's up to the team to the how. And I always tell the team that teams that I work with that, hey, the how's the fun part. Like, how are we going to do this? So when I say, here's what we need to do, and they go, but how about this? And what about this? I'm like, hey, that's the fun part you get to figure out. But if you don't successfully communicate that what, because they can't hear you because of the way, if you're talking too fast or you're talking with bullet points instead of another more people-oriented way, well, then it kind of doesn't matter. You got to be successful at communication, not just coming up with the ideas to lead. So that's all really good stuff. So given those challenges with the geography too, what's your best advice for working with the remote teams? Now, I'm assuming everybody's not coming together physically very often.
No, maybe once every 6 months or a year are we all together.
Okay.
So the remote teams, again, so when you text something or when you email something, that has to be very clear, because if it is taken out of context or it's just a blip of something, it certainly will be taken out of context, and then it's often run in the wrong way. So remote teams are best. I like to do conversations like this where I can see patients or people's faces now. I don't like just a quick, email or text or something like that. Now, people I know very, very well, that's one thing. But when you have a new team member, it's better for me to have a conversation like we have, where I can see your face, you can see mine, and you can, that they know that I'm here to help. I'm I'm the biggest cheerleader you're ever going to have in your life when it comes to your professional side. So I'm just here to do whatever you need me to do so that you can be successful, and communicating that in a way that they can see my eyes and see my body language, that they understand that this is the truth, because it's easy to give lip service to those things. And it's really easy to just kind of blow over it as well. And until they know that you really care about them and that you're going to, talk to them, and it's a real conversation, not talking at them, but to them, so we can become part of the family and part of what we're doing here. That's one of the most critical things that I've seen. And now as that friendship or relationship grows, whether you're the leader or not, then you can kind of understand personalities and understand, hey, if I say something, that's not meant negatively. That's just the way I saw it, or whatever. You've got to always add a little color, I guess, to the picture, so that it's not as, well, he's fixing to fire somebody, or somebody's fixing to, the world's fixing to end, or something like that. That's not the case.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as you build relationships with people, it's certainly, we tend to give each other more grace and cut people slack on, I maybe misread your text. Tell me what you meant by that. If I know you better, if I don't know you and you send a text, I might misread it, and that might be the end of the relationship. So building the relationship certainly gives you a chance to make more mistakes. We're all going to make mistakes, but you get a chance to recover as you strengthen those relationships. That's right.
That grace that you build, like having this conversation right now. I mean, the grace that comes along with that. If I were to send you a text, well, Randy, I totally get that. So it's so important that you have that time with them, one-on-one or as a small group, that you build that relationship, no matter who it is, especially if they're coming into that. There's the outer circle, the inner circle, and then there's the ones you really depend on. And as they move through those circles, you've got to make sure that relationship is strong. So for the times that it's tough, exactly what happened with COVID, for the times that if I hadn't been the hospitalist prior to being the CEO, when COVID came through, that would have been a nightmare. But everybody in that hospital and everybody in that whole system knew that I was there to protect them and protect those patients. And I did those things, and they were able to move quickly and know that I knew what I was talking about when I spoke as well. So
fantastic. Well, Randy, this has been great. Really good points. I love a lot of what you've been telling us about how things worked during COVID and communication styles and things. It's very, very helpful. I know our audience is going to get a lot out of that. If somebody wanted to reach out to you to learn more about what you're doing, specifically with Restor Metabolix and the diabetes treatment, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
So they can go on our website at restormetabolix.com. They also could email me directly at rcrawford@restor, RESTOR, Metabolix, METABOLIX.com. And I'll be happy to answer any questions or provide you with answers or point you in the right direction for sure.
Yeah, fantastic. And we'll put those in the show notes so people have access to reach out to you. So, well, my friend, I appreciate your time. It's been super helpful, super enlightening. I'm sure everyone got a lot out of that. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll connect again soon. And that brings us to the end of another episode of the Clarity Advisors Show. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Clarity Advisors Show. Clarity Advisors is a speaking, training, and consulting firm specializing in helping you simplify your sales and operating systems to improve efficiency and grow your profits. Connect with Clarity Advisors today to learn more about how they can help you improve communication and get your team aligned and engaged for greater success.